The silence in the Kinshasa locker room was deafening. Muhammad Ali sat slumped on the wooden bench, his hands still wrapped in blood-stained tape, staring at the concrete floor as if it held answers to questions he hadn't asked yet. Outside, 60,000 Zairians were still chanting his name, their voices echoing through the stadium walls like thunder that wouldn't stop. But inside this cramped, sweat-soaked room, Ali felt more alone than he had in years. George Foreman was unconscious 3 rooms down the hallway, and nobody was talking about what really happened in those final seconds of round 8. Dr. Ferdi Pacheco pushed through the crowd of handlers and reporters, his medical bag clutched tight in his weathered hands. He had been Ali's personal physician for 8 years, had seen him through 3 title reigns and countless wars, but the look on his face tonight was different, worried, almost frightened. He knelt beside Ali and began examining his hands, his ribs, his face, but his eyes kept darting toward the door where 2 men in dark suits stood watching everything with the intensity of hawks circling prey. "How you feeling, champ?" Pacheco whispered, his voice barely audible above the celebration outside. Ali looked up slowly, his famous smile nowhere to be found. "Doc, something ain't right about tonight. Something ain't right at all." The fight had ended exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds ago, but already the official story was being written. The rumble in the jungle. Ali's greatest comeback. The rope-a-dope strategy that fooled the world. But 3 people in that locker room knew the truth was far more complicated, far more dangerous, and far more shocking than anything the press would ever print. Angelo Dundee, Ali's longtime trainer, dismissed the last of the reporters with sharp words and locked the door behind them. His hands were shaking as he turned the deadbolt, something Ali had never seen in 20 years of working together. Dundee had trained champions, had been in the corner for some of the most brutal fights in boxing history, but tonight had rattled him to his core. "We need to talk," Dundee said, his voice hoarse from screaming instructions during the fight. "All of us. Right now." The 2 men in suits stepped forward, and Ali finally got a good look at their faces. The older one, maybe 55 with silver hair and cold blue eyes, introduced himself as Agent Morrison from the State Department. The younger one, built like a linebacker with a scar running down his left cheek, said nothing but kept his hand resting on something inside his jacket. "Mr. Ali," Morrison began, his voice smooth as silk and twice as dangerous. "What happened out there tonight was remarkable, truly remarkable, but we need to discuss certain irregularities that occurred during the fight." Ali's blood ran cold. He knew exactly what Morrison was talking about, but admitting it would change everything, would destroy everything, would expose a conspiracy that reached from the boxing rings of Zaire all the way to the highest levels of the American government. It had started 3 months earlier, in a hotel room in New York City. Ali was preparing for the biggest fight of his comeback, the chance to reclaim the heavyweight title that had been stripped from him for refusing to fight in Vietnam. His exile from boxing had lasted 3.5 years, 3.5 years of legal battles and financial struggles, and watching other men claim the crown he had never lost in the ring. The knock on his hotel room door came at 2 in the morning. Ali opened it expecting room service or maybe a late-night interview request, but instead found Morrison and 3 other men in identical dark suits standing in the hallway like undertakers at a funeral. "We need to talk, Mr. Ali," Morrison had said, pushing past him into the room without waiting for an invitation, "about your upcoming fight with Mr. Foreman, about certain opportunities that might present themselves, about your future in this country." Daim. They had spread photographs across his coffee table, pictures of him meeting with anti-war protesters, pictures of him at the mosque, pictures of him with people the government considered enemies of the state. The message was clear without being spoken: cooperate or face consequences that would make his boxing exile look like a vacation. "What do you want?" Ali had asked. though he already suspected the answer. George Foreman is more than just a boxer, Mr. Ali. He's a symbol of American strength, American values, American dominance on the world stage. His victory in Zaire would send a powerful message to our allies and our enemies alike. Your victory, on the other hand, would send a very different message, one that certain people in Washington find problematic. Ali had laughed then, the same laugh that had charmed reporters and intimidated opponents for a decade. You want me to lose? You want me to throw the fight? We want you to be realistic about your chances, Morrison had replied. George Foreman is younger, stronger, hungrier. He's knocked out 40 of his 47 opponents. You're 32 years old, coming off a 3-year layoff, fighting a man who hits harder than anyone you've ever faced. The smart money says you lose anyway. We're just ensuring that outcome. But Ali had refused. Had told them to get out of his room, out of his life, out of his business. Had sworn that he would rather die in that ring than dishonor everything he stood for by taking a dive for the United States government. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Now, sitting in that locker room in Kinshasa, Ali realized that Morrison and his people had never intended to take no for an answer. They had simply moved to Plan B. The blood work, Doctor, Pacheco said suddenly, his voice cutting through Ali's memories like a scalpel. The blood work from George's pre-fight physical. I need to see it again. Morrison's eyes narrowed. That's not possible, Doctor. Medical records are confidential. Bullshit! Pacheco snapped, his usual professional demeanor cracking. I've been George's examining physician for this fight. I have a right to see those results, especially after what happened out there tonight. Well, what had happened was this. George Foreman, the most feared puncher in heavyweight boxing, had fought like a man underwater. His legendary power had been reduced to arm punches that barely moved Ali when they landed. His famous stamina had evaporated by the 4th round, leaving him gasping and sluggish, while Ali danced around him like a man half his age. And in the 8th round, when Ali finally unleashed his combinations, Foreman had gone down like he'd been shot. But it wasn't the knockdown that bothered Pacheco. It was what he had seen in Foreman's eyes just before he fell. Not the glazed look of a man who'd been hit too hard, but the confused, disoriented expression of someone fighting through a chemical fog. You drugged him, Ali said quietly, the words falling into the room like stones into still water. You sons of bitches drugged George Foreman. Morrison didn't deny it, didn't even look surprised that Ali had figured it out. Mr. Foreman was given a mild sedative before the fight, something to take the edge off his aggression, make him more manageable. The dosage was carefully calculated to avoid detection while ensuring the desired outcome. Desired outcome? Ali exploded, jumping to his feet so fast that his cornerman stepped back in alarm. You made me a fraud! You made this whole fight a lie! We made you a champion again, Morrison replied calmly. We gave you back everything you lost when you decided to play politics instead of boxing. The title, the money, the fame, the legacy. All we ask in return is your silence. Angelo Dundee had heard enough. He stepped between Ali and Morrison, his weathered face twisted with disgust. Get out of here right now before I call security. Security works for us tonight, Mr. Dundee. The younger agent spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a Brooklyn accent and the promise of violence. As does the local police, the medical staff, and half the boxing commission. This conversation stays in this room, or people start having accidents. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Ali looked around the room at the faces of the men who had been with him through everything, who had believed in him when the whole world turned its back, and saw the same realization dawning in their eyes. They were trapped, all of them. Why? Ali asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why go to all this trouble? Why not just let the fight happen naturally? Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Because, Mr. Ali, you're more valuable to us as a controlled champion than as a defeated challenger. Your influence, your platform, your ability to reach people that traditional politicians can't touch. We need that. America needs that. And now that you're champion again, now that you owe your victory to us, we own that. The full scope of the conspiracy began to crystallize in Ali's mind. This wasn't just about one fight, one title, one moment in boxing history. This was about control, about using his image, his voice, his credibility to advance an agenda he had spent years fighting against. They had turned him into a puppet without him even knowing the strings were there. Doctor, Pacheco was still examining the medical equipment that had been used on Foreman before the fight, his trained eye catching details that others had missed. Propranolol, he muttered, holding up a small vial that had been carelessly discarded in a medical waste bin. Beta blocker, reduces heart rate, decreases adrenaline response, causes fatigue and disorientation. Completely undetectable in standard drug tests if you know how to mask it. Very good, Doctor, Morrison said. Though I should point out that your medical license depends on your discretion in this matter. But Ali wasn't listening to the threats anymore. He was thinking about the crowd outside, still chanting his name, still celebrating what they believed was the greatest comeback in sports history. He was thinking about the millions of people around the world who would read about this fight in tomorrow's newspapers, who would see it as proof that determination and skill could overcome any obstacle. He was thinking about the kids in the ghetto who would be inspired by his victory, who would believe that they too could rise above their circumstances through hard work and faith. And he was thinking about George Foreman, lying unconscious in a hospital bed, his reputation destroyed by a fight he never had a fair chance to win. I can't do this, Ali said finally. I can't live with this lie. Morrison's expression hardened. You don't have a choice, Mr. Ali. The fight is over. The result is official. George Foreman was defeated by the better man on the better night. That's the story, and that's the story that will be told for the rest of history. And if I tell the truth, then you'll be remembered as a conspiracy theorist, a sore winner, a man who couldn't accept his own success without inventing elaborate fantasies to explain it. Your credibility will be destroyed, your legacy will be tarnished, and your family will face consequences that I'd prefer not to detail. Angelo Dundee stepped forward, his loyalty to Ali overriding his fear of the government agents. You can't threaten him like this. He's the heavyweight champion of the world. People will listen to him. People listen to champions who win clean fights, Morrison replied. They don't listen to champions who admit to being part of a fix, even an unwitting one. Mr. Ali's choice is simple. Be remembered as the greatest boxer who ever lived, or be remembered as the man who exposed the corruption in his own sport and destroyed boxing forever. The weight of that choice settled on Ali's shoulders like a lead blanket. He thought about all the young fighters coming up through the ranks, all the kids who dreamed of championship glory, all the fans who believed that boxing was a pure test of skill and will. If he exposed the truth about tonight, he would be exposing the truth about a system that was rotten to its core. He would be destroying the dreams of millions of people who needed those dreams to survive. But he would also be living a lie for the rest of his life. Dr. Pacheco finished his examination of the evidence and turned to face the room. There's something else, he said quietly. Something you need to know about George's condition. Morrison tensed. What are you talking about, Doctor? The dosage, Pacheco continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. The amount of propranolol in his system. It was too high, dangerously high. George isn't just unconscious from the knockout. He's in a drug-induced coma. The room went silent except for the distant sound of celebration from the stadium. Ali felt his knees go weak as the full implications hit him. Not only had the fight been fixed, but George Foreman's life was now in danger because of it. "You're lying," the younger agent said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Check for yourself," Pacheco challenged. "Run a full blood panel. Check his vital signs. That man is fighting for his life right now, and it has nothing to do with anything that happened in the ring." Morrison pulled out a radio and spoke in hushed, urgent tones to someone on the other end. After a few minutes of tense conversation, he turned back to the group with the expression that had gone from confident to concerned. "There may have been a miscalculation in the dosage," he admitted. "Our medical team is working to stabilize Mr. Foreman's condition." "Your medical team?" Ali exploded. "Your medical team nearly killed a man to make me champion? What kind of monsters are you people?" "The kind that get results," Morrison replied coldly. "The kind that understand that sometimes individual sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. George Foreman will recover. His career may be over, but he'll live, and you'll go on to be the most famous athlete in the world, with a platform that can influence millions of people in ways that serve American interests." But Ali had heard enough. He stood up slowly, his decision crystallizing in his mind like ice forming on a winter lake. "No, I won't be part of this. I won't be your puppet, and I won't let George Foreman's career end because of your games." "You don't understand the position you're in," Morrison warned. "We own you now. We own your victory, your title, your future. Cross us, and we'll destroy everything you've worked for." Ali looked around the room one more time at the faces of the men who had stood by him through everything, and made his choice. "Then destroy it. Because I'd rather lose everything as an honest man than keep anything as a fraud." The confrontation that followed would never make it into the official record of that night. Security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned. Witnesses developed sudden cases of amnesia. Medical records disappeared. But in that locker room in Kinshasa, Muhammad Ali made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He agreed to keep the secret, not because of the threats, not because of the promises, but because Dr. Pacheco convinced him that exposing the truth would do more harm than good. George Foreman would recover, but slowly and with lasting effects that would end his boxing career regardless. The scandal would destroy not just Ali's legacy, but the sport itself, taking down innocent fighters and honest promoters along with the corrupt officials who had orchestrated the fix. "Sometimes," Pacheco had said, "the right choice is the one that hurts the most." So Ali kept quiet. He accepted the championship, gave the interviews, played the role of the conquering hero, but every night for the rest of his life he would lie awake thinking about those 8 rounds in Zaire, about the victory that wasn't really his, about the price that George Foreman had paid for a government conspiracy that neither of them had asked to be part of. The official story became legend. The rumble in the jungle, the greatest upset in boxing history. The rope-a-dope strategy that proved intelligence could overcome brute force. Muhammad Ali, the aging warrior who reclaimed his throne through skill and determination and an unbreakable will to win. But the real story died in that locker room, buried under threats and blackmail and the terrible weight of a choice between truth and consequences. The real story of what happened after Muhammad Ali knocked out George Foreman was that both men lost something that night that they would never get back. Ali lost his innocence. Foreman lost 3 years of his life to depression and confusion, never fully understanding why his body had betrayed him in the biggest fight of his career, and boxing lost a piece of its soul, though the world would never know it. Years later, when reporters asked Ali about that night in Kinshasa, he would always give the same answer. "I fought my fight, George fought his fight, and the best man won." But those who knew him well could see something in his eyes when he said it. a shadow that hadn't been there before, a weight that seemed to grow heavier with each passing year. The truth about the rumble in the jungle would remain buried for decades, hidden in classified files and sealed medical records and the guilty consciences of the few men who knew what really happened. But truth has a way of surfacing eventually, like a body in a lake that refuses to stay submerged. And someday, when all the players in this conspiracy are dead and gone, when the geopolitical concerns that motivated the fix are ancient history, when boxing has evolved beyond recognition, someone will find those files. Someone will piece together the evidence. Someone will tell the real story of the night Muhammad Ali became champion again. Until then, the legend lives on. The greatest comeback in sports history. The triumph of will over strength. The night Muhammad Ali proved that champions are made not just of muscle and bone, but of heart and soul, and an unshakable belief in themselves. Even if that belief was built on a lie. If you made it this far and felt every word, you won't leave without subscribing, will you? I tell these stories with my heart in my hands, to reach people like you, who feel, who get emotional, who live. If this truly touched you, give back, comment, subscribe. Come be part of this family with me until the next video. Du siehst, tusen Titten ab Nessenchen.